තස්ස භගවතු අරහතෝ සම්මා සම්බුද්දස්ස නමෝ තස්ස භගවතෝ අරහතෝ සම්මා සම්බුද්දස්ස නමෝ තස්ස භගවතෝ අරහතෝ සම්මා සම්බුද්දස්ස. May the Noble Triple Gem bless you all. So first of all, today also that we are going to start the Dhamma discussion series, which is about the enlightenment factors. So far that we have discussed 22 mental or enlightenment factors. They are about fourfold mindfulness, then four strivings, then four bases for spiritual power, satara irdipada, then five spiritual faculties, pancha indriya, then the five powers, pancha bala. So we have discussed these enlightenment factors so far. Now that we are going to discuss about the 7 factors of enlightenment, satta buddhanga dharma. So let's see what are the factors that we are going to discuss here. I'm going to read the page number 151. The 7 factors of enlightenment. Monks, these 7 factors of enlightenment, when developed and cultivated, lead to going beyond from near shore to the far shore. What 7? The enlightenment factor of mindfulness, the enlightenment factor of investigation of the Dhamma, the enlightenment factor of energy, the enlightenment factor of rapture, the enlightenment factor of tranquility, the enlightenment factor of concentration, and the enlightenment factor of equanimity. These 7 factors of enlightenment, when developed and cultivated, lead to going beyond from near shore to the far shore. So near shore means here the samsara, and far shore means the nibbana. That is what the meaning of that statement. And these enlightenment factors are must to be developed in us to attain the supreme bliss of nibbana, or going across the samsara, or going to the far shore. So these enlightenment factors are going to be developed 100% when you realize, when you generate the path consciousness and the fruit consciousnesses, marga chitta and phala chitta. Before that, we have to develop gradually until attain that great fruits. Through this teaching of the Buddha, he has showed us the mindfulness, investigation of the Dhamma, energy, rapture, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity are the 7 factors of enlightenment which cause to go beyond samsara. So these factors in name, the mindfulness means sati sambodhanga, investigation of Dhamma means Dhamma vichaya sambodhanga, energy means virya sambodhanga, rapture means piti sambodhanga, tranquility means passaddhi sambodhanga, concentration means samadhi, and equanimity means upekka. So these are the 7 enlightenment factors. Satta buddhanga dhamma. So these factors helps us to go beyond the samsara. Bodhanga is a combination of the 2 terms, bodhi and anga. There are several meanings of this term. Of them, there are two meanings which are pertinent in this case. They are the group of Dhamma which realizes Nibbana. The person who realizes Nibbana. For the seekers of Nibbana, the being who realizes that Nibbana, there are many obstacles for the arising of the supra-mundane path, which leads to the attainment of Nibbana. When practice meditation, the nature of shrinking of mind or laziness and sleepiness, restlessness, or the nature of not claiming calming the mind, retaining in samsara as a nature of defilements like greediness, the nature of performing meritorious deeds as an effort of retaining in samsara, sensual indulgence, self-mortification, annihilationist view, and eternality view are some of them. So we know that the most difficult thing to be done is to develop these wholesome factors to attain enlightenment for an average or worldly being. Because always the worldly being's nature is tend to do unwholesome. That's why it is expressed in the commentaries like Papasming Ramati Mano. The worldling's nature is always to tend to do unwholesome. That's the nature of the mind. As mentioned here, the sensual indulgence and self-mortifications. I think you might have heard that sensual indulgence means kama sukhalikanu yoga, always engage in sensual pleasures. And self-mortification means torturing the self or doing some difficult things to attain sort of liberation that we find in the Buddha's time. These two are called extremes, anta. These extremist behavior happens because of wrong views. For an example, like as mentioned here, annihilationist view, uchcheda ditti. So the annihilationist view is that if someone believes that, okay, after death of this life, everything is going to be over. That is what you call annihilationist view. So the person who has that wrong view is tend to practice sensual indulgence, kama sukhalikana yoga, excessive indulgence in the sense gratification. Because those people believe that after death, there'll be nothing. So while you are living, you have to do everything to enjoy. So the eternalist view is called Sassatavada, one who believes that there's something called self, unchanging self, going life to life, something like that wrong view, which denies by the teachings of the Buddha. And those who have that wrong view tend to practice self-mortification, atta kilamatana yoga. In the Buddha's time, these two wrong views and these two extremes were practiced. So the Buddha also, before or as the Bodhisattva, he also practiced these two ends, these two extremes, and finally that he realized those practices do not help in the liberation. So instead of those extremes that he practiced, middle path, as we know. So the nature of the worldly being is always tend towards the unwholesome because of the defilements. So in order to avoid that, instead then develop the wholesome, one needs to develop these factors of enlightenment. Just like the darkness would
Sir, I
never.
want to say,
Yes, Mahendra.
in it says the nature of performing meritorious deeds as an effort of retaining in samsara. So does that imply that when one is doing meritorious deeds, their Chetanava is to extend samsara?
If there is no any wish to attain the Nibbana, so that the even wholesome deeds also can be a cause to retain in the samsara. So we know that the avijja paccaya sankhara, so which means that even wholesome activities also happens due to ignorance. It does not help directly, but passively it helps.
So when one is engaged in meritorious deeds, it's important to be thoughtful about the motivation behind it. Is it, Bhante?
Absolutely, yes. Yes. So whatsoever, we know that the ignorance, avidya,
Yes.
is a condition to perform wholesome and unwholesome.
Sometimes one may just engage in wholesome activity because it's wholesome without sort of ulterior motive. In that
Yes.
situation,
Yeah.
how we
It's,
want to
yeah,
understand.
yeah. It's still that the teachings of the Buddha always encourage in perform meritorious deeds, because those who perform meritorious deeds, they can get the good rebirths in
Yeah.
heavenly realms, or
Yeah.
I mean human or higher realms. So that can be an opportunity to learn the teachings of the Buddha really, or having good friends and come to know the Dhamma, something like that. That's why always the Buddha encourage to perform wholesome. On the other hand, if one performs unwholesome,
Yes.
right, it's so there's no way to
Yes.
have a chance.
But what this is telling is it's best to keep Nibbana as your goal whenever you are
Perform meritorious deed.
understood, Bhante. Thank you.
Yes, it's okay. Just like the darkness would never dispel without a light, aforementioned laziness and sleepiness, etc., the obstacle for the realization of Nibbana will never dispel from the minds of beings without developing their totally opposite things. The factors of enlightenment are seven things which destroy and dispel the obstacles that obstruct the realization of Nibbana. Their names are given above. Since those seven factors, like the factors of enlightenment, of mindfulness, and investigation of Dhamma, are helpful for the realization of Nibbana, they are called factors of enlightenment because they are the factors of the group of Dhamma related to the enlightenment, and the factors of the practitioner who realizes Nibbana. So in this paragraph, there's a very important phrase which says, the obstacle for the realization of Nibbana will never dispel from the minds of beings without developing their totally opposite things. So we know that we, or the average ordinary beings, have defilements which defile the mind. So what we are supposed to do is to develop exact opposite, the wholesome qualities, which can dispel the defilements. For an example, we know that there's something called craving, greed. So we have to develop non-greed, which is one of the ultimate mental factors, cetasikas, alobha. that we have to develop that wholesome factor. Then to hatred, that we have to develop the metta, or the loving kindness, which is called adosa chaitasika, and non-hatred mental factor. We have to develop that. In order to dispel ignorance, we have to develop the wisdom, which is one of the wholesome mental factors. So like that, we have to develop these wholesome factors, or we can say these, as mentioned here, the enlightenment factors, which are totally opposite for the defilements, and only then that we can dispel those defilements. That is why these the factors of enlightenment are critical in the practice to attain the Nibbana. Once the Buddha said that these factors of enlightenment are the 7 gems in the dispensation of the Buddha, like the 7 gems of the wheel-turning monarch. He said, monks, with the arising of the Tathagata, the worthy, the fully enlightened one, there arise the 7 factors of enlightenment. Tathagatassa bhikkhave pātu bhavo arahato samma sambuddhassa sattanam bojjhanganam pātu bhavo. Likewise, the person who has developed, cultivated, and made much of these gems of the 7 factors of enlightenment is not a poor person, he said. Sattanam ko bhikkhave bojjhanga ratananam bhavi tattaha bahulika tatta adaliddoti uchati. For the attainment of the supra-mundane fruition and the mundane material and immaterial jhana, one should have these 7 factors of enlightenment. Therefore, by everybody who practices for the attainment of supra-mundane fruition and the mundane jhana should develop the factors of enlightenment and should give a special consideration to the factors of enlightenment. So these factors of enlightenment are equalized to the 7 dhammas, so the 7 gems of the universal monarchy, universal monarch, Chakravarti Raja. So there's a concept in the teachings of the Buddha about Chakravarti, King Chakravarti, who dominates all the universe, or all the worlds. So he also has something called 7 gems. So the Buddha mentioned these, the factors of enlightenment are also very important in the realization of the Nibbana. And he mentioned the 7 gems are also quite special for the universal monarch. All practitioners should recognize the factors of enlightenment. Their supports or dependence should be understood. The way they are to be developed should be understood. The things that cause for their development should be understood. The time that is appropriate and inappropriate for the development of particular factors of enlightenment should be understood. The factors of mindfulness. The factor of mindfulness. He said earlier in the section of the establishment of mindfulness is mindfulness. The factor of mindfulness is the Dhamma, which prevents the stream of consciousness of beings from unwholesome side and maintains them in the fields of body, feelings, mind, and mental objects. By establishing of mind for the development and maintenance of the wholesome side, it gradually develops in its domains of body, feelings, mind and mental objects, and having abandoned all in the side of unmindfulness and completing the side of mindfulness eventually produces the knowledge of the path of the arahantship. Sihiya is a Sinhalese term used for the term sati, mindfulness in Pali. The term sihiya gives more meanings than the Pali term sati. Therefore, for the introduction of this term sati, mindfulness, in the factors of enlightenment, it is better used with another adjectival phrase as mindfulness that causes the knowledge of the path. Mindfulness that produces nibbana also could be used. Mindfulness that supports for the attainment of supra-mundane knowledge of the path is to be understood that the mindfulness that supports to attain nibbana is a factor of enlightenment of mindfulness. This mindfulness is called mindfulness that produces nibbana, according to the highest thing that it brings us. This mindfulness is supportive for the gaining of sensual, material and immaterial wholesome and fortunes as well. Therefore, it should be understood that this mindfulness brings us them also before attainment of Nibbana. So as we discussed even before, the sati, the mindfulness, is a factor that avoid the mind falling into the unwholesome. Whenever the mind falls to the unwholesome, if there is mindfulness or the sati, it reminds that the mind is going to unwholesome, generating unwholesome, and it reminds to develop the wholesome. That's what the sati or the mindfulness does. So one who develops the sati can get the even worldly attainments. For those who have a profession or those who study, so they can do them quite well when they develop the sati. And as we discuss, only that when we develop the sati, that we can gain the jhanas, material, immaterial, wholesome, and fortunes as well. So all these, the positive or the wholesome things that we can get only when they develop the sati. But at the end, or the culmination of the sati, developing the sati means in the path consciousness, the marga chittas, which have the ability to eliminate the unwholesome or the defilements permanently. Then the factor of enlightenment of the investigation, Dhamma Vichaya Sambodhanga.
Avasarai Bante, before you go to the next one, can I please
Yes.
ask you a question?
Yes, of course.
This sati you are discussing in Saptabojjhanga is the same as the four foundations of mindfulness in Satipatthana.
Yes, of course.
Or is it?
Yes,
Is there any differences, or is it's the same?
the ultimately that we know there's only the mental factor called sati. In all the wholesome chittas, there should be the sati, the mental factor. So what happens here in this, as we discuss, for an example, firstly that we've discussed the fourfold mindfulness. Then there is mindfulness in the faculties, sati indriya, then sati bala. Then here we discuss as an enlightenment factor. And also again that we are going to discuss in the path factors as well, Magganga, Sati. So what I want to tell you here, ultimately the same thing, the Sati, the mental factor, but in these places, as I mentioned, the Sati works differently.
Right, Bhante.
It works differently, but as an ultimate reality, it is one thing.
Right.
For an example, to understand easily that as we humans, that we do several things at several times.
Yes.
Right? So there are several names for us. For an example, if we talk about father, he does activities or duties as a father, and at the same time as a husband, and at the same time as a professional. He does various things, so we name them in various ways, but the person is same person. So like that, here the sati, in the mindfulness, it works in some way, and in the faculties, it works in another way, in the powers, it works in another way. Like that, it works in quite differently.
Right.
I hope you get some idea.
Yes, Bhante.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
So as a mental factor, when you learn, it is to be understood that the sati's duty is always to know the mind goes to unwholesome when there's sati. So it is easy to understand what happens to the mentality, whether it goes to unwholesome, and it helps to generate wholesome.
Right, Bhante.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then the factor of enlightenment, of the investigation of the Dhamma, is a sharp knowledge that one can know and see things as they really are, in diversified manner, as impermanent, unsatisfactory, and soulless, or solidity, contact, aggregates, elements, bases, faculties, truths, and the dependent origination by breaking the concepts of being, person, self, eternal, external, absolute, material or immaterial things, which are covered by the four compactness. Of the compactness of as continuity, the compactness as a mass, the compactness as a function, and the compactness as a cognitive object. It is gradually developed in the aggregate, which is a field for vipassana, and having entirely cut off all delusion, one eventually attains the knowledge of the path of arahantship. So here the investigation of the dhammas, the dhamma vichaya sambodhanga. So we know that when we study the teachings, that there are two truths, the conventional truth and the ultimate truth or ultimate reality. So in ordinary usage, ordinary parlance, we speak of a being. But when we investigate, when we start to categorize or break into small parts that we can understand in various ways, that there's no such a being. For an example, in the deep teachings of the Buddha, that being is that we can categorize into various ways of diversification. For example, aggregates, that there are 5 aggregates. Then we can break into another parts as elements, the dhatu, and bases. They're called ayatanas, 12 bases. Then the faculties, indriyas, there are 22 faculties. Then the truths, we know that there are 4 noble truths and the dependent origination. So all these methods are to be categorized or investigate as ultimate realities. So, and there are 3 universal characteristics of these ultimate realities. They are in Pali, anicca, dukkha, anatta. As mentioned here, impermanent, unsatisfactory, which is dukkha, and soulless, anatta. So that's what that we all are supposed to realize. Yes, as mentioned before, there are various methods to realize these, one of these 3 natures of these various ways of categorization as aggregates, then elements, bases, faculties, truths, dependent origination. So whatever the ways that we examine or investigate, at one point what happens is we, when the path consciousnesses, the marga chittas appear, so the ultimate reality or the ultimate truth can be realized.
Avasara Bhante, is this Dhammavichaya similar to the Vichara in the Chetasikas?
No, in the Chetasikas, this is called Panya.
Oh.
We discuss in the wholesome mental factors, the Panya.
Yes, yes.
Yes, Panya is the ultimate Dhamma which does the activity or the duty of the investigation of the Dhamma.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so the culmination of development of this, the Dhammavichaya Sambojjhanga is the Arahantship. Okay, the factor of enlightenment of energy. And so before that, I want to mention one thing again. I think those who attend to the Abhidhamma class, they have some idea. These ultimate realities, Paramatta Dhammas, have 2 different characteristics. As mentioned here, the universal characteristics. There are 3 universal characteristics, and those ultimate realities have their own characteristics as well. In the mind have its own characteristic, which is knowing the object. Like that, there are other that we learn. There are 80 ultimate realities. So all these realities, ultimate realities, have their own characteristics. So when you develop this Dhammavichaya Sambojjhanga, you realize all those characteristics as well. The factor of enlightenment of energy, as mentioned earlier in the section of right striving, is the strenuous energy, striving, that one should have in the practice of meditation to encourage and continue the practice without any hesitation, but advancing the mind until it reaches to the goal. It gradually develops by performing the 4 strivings, like striving for the abandoning of unwholesome thoughts, and dissipates the opponent defilements for energy, and finally helps to attain the supramundane knowledge of the path, which is known as Bodhi. So the Virya Sambojjhanga that we discussed before, 4-fold Virya Sambojjhanga, that is what is meant here. The factor of enlightenment of rapture.
Avasara Bhante,
Yes, Mahatma.
Sorry. So
Yes.
virya is found in the Pancha Indriya, the Pancha Bala, in the Iddipada,
Yes.
and in so many places. So again, it's slightly different how it is actually
Works.
works, is it?
Yes. So as we've discussed before in the for faculties, the powers, in the in the ultimate sense, it is as a virya chetasika, it has its own character. But when it works in different places, it has some different way of functioning. Then the factor of enlightenment of rapture is the rapture which thrills the mind of the practitioner in his meditation. When doing something that which it is to be done for a long time, if there is no rapture in his or her mind, that cannot be carrying on. Attainment of a jhana or path and fruition by engaging in meditation is a prolonged mission. Therefore, in order to carry it on properly, there should be rapture in the mind. That is how rapture becomes a factor of for the attainment of sambodhi, the enlightenment. That rapture thrills not only the mind of the practitioner, but also his body. It is because of this rapture that the practitioners could dwell healthily, even without having good food and drinks. The practitioners who have no rapture about their practice cannot engage in meditation and dwell in the woods, taking scanty food and drinks. The person who has no rapture, though engaged in meditation, always goes backwards. Therefore, his practice of meditation is not successful. Rapture, having developed in the wholesome states, develops the four strivings, like abandoning of arising unwholesome and abandoning of having aversion in meditation, laziness and sleepiness together with all their defilements, completes delightfulness of meditation as one of the noble usages, and finally helps for the supramundane knowledge of the path of enlightenment, sambodhi. So the rapture is the piti, which helps to motivate the practitioner to develop these enlightenment factors until achieve the final goal, which is called sambodhi. So those who practice deep meditation, they can maintain this rapture even when they do not have a proper food or even sometimes proper dwellings. But still, if they practice meditation quite well, so they can maintain the rapture. Later, we are going to discuss some of the stories as well about that. The importance of rapture in the practice of spirituality. The factor of enlightenment of tranquility. Tranquility means here the passaddhi. The factor of enlightenment of tranquility means both tranquility of body and tranquility of mind, of the practitioner in meditation that pacifies both physical and mental fatigue and grief. It is the nature of mind that it does not stay on one particular object, but slip to many objects. When staying in one posture for a long time, both body and mind becomes tiresome. The mind then becomes quite fatigued when it is kept on one object. As it cannot move to many objects, the mind starts to shiver. That fatigue, grief, and shivering arisen in the mind and pacified by tranquility of body and tranquility of mind. It is not incorrect to say that the pacification of body and mind itself is a factor of enlightenment of tranquility. As long as one has the nature of fatigue, grief, and shivering of mind, that person cannot gain higher concentration, like the first jhana or knowledge. In order to gain them, mind should be pacified. Therefore, tranquility is a factor of enlightenment. It gradually develops in the process of abandoning the arising, unwholesome, and finally helps for the attainment of supra-mundane knowledge of the path. So, there's a mental factor called kaya passaddhi and chitta passaddhi. So, that's what here is discussed about. Kaya passaddhi means, kaya here means the whole mental factors. And chitta passaddhi is also one of the mental factors which helps to tranquil the mind. So maintaining the calmness of these mental factors and mind is also a factor of enlightenment, which helps to develop the concentration and all other mental factors. So when we discuss these things, that we have to remember these mental factors are something called chetasikas, which means they appear in all the minds, but in different with different of functions, but it varies. The functions are varies of these mental factors, and as we've discussed before, in the path consciousnesses, these mental factors, or what we call the enlightenment factors, developed to the capacity, having the capacity to eliminate all the defilements or the bondages or the sangyojanas. Yes, then the factor of enlightenment of concentration is the concentration which was dealt above in the section of the spiritual faculty and mental powers, which never allow the mind of the practitioner to be distracted in many objects, but focused on one object and firmly established on the object. It gradually develops an abundance of defilements like sensual desire, which are distracted the mind and finally helps for the attainment of supramundane and knowledge of the path. So the concentration is what you call ekagata, which is one of the occasional mental factors, pakinnaka chetasikas. So this mental factor should be developed to the level of jhanas, and at the path consciousnesses, the mental factor or the factor of enlightenment has the ability to cut off all the defilements. And when we develop this mental factor, it improves the ability to maintain the mind towards one object. That's what happens when you develop jhanas. When you develop jhanas, you can keep the mind towards single object for as long as you want, or even hours. When you enter jhanas, you can keep the mind towards one object. Then the factor of enlightenment of equanimity is
Sarai Bhante,
yes.
sorry to disturb.
So no worries. Yes, go
Uh,
ahead.
you were talking about Kaya Pasadi. That means, is it Vedana Sanya Sankara feeling?
No, there's a different mental factor called Kaya Pasadi.
Right.
Actually, there are two mental factors.
The Kaya.
Kaya Pasadi
Where
and Chitta
mental
Pasadi.
Chitta Pasadi.
Yes. There are 19 mental factors which are common in all the wholesome chittas. So these two mental factors are also arise in those wholesome chittas, but in this occasion, I mean, as factors of enlightenment, when it develops to that level, it has the ability to calm down the mental factors and the mind.
Right.
Yes. So when we hear the body, we simply remember just the physical body. But here, what is meant for as the tranquility of body, which means one of the mental factors. Is when you develop this, yes, I mean, the physical body also develops the sort of tranquility or less fatigue, I mean.
Thank you, Bhante. And Chitta Pasadi is controlling of
The mind, calming down the mind.
That's controlling of Uddacha Kukucha. Is it, or is it different?
I can't exactly remember, but yes, the Uddachakukutta is, I think, one of the two unwholesome factors, right? Which a distracted mind from developing this tranquility. So yes, it can work in that way as well. Yes, I remember when we study the jhana factors, there is one of the jhana factors which works against the Uddachca Kukucha restlessness. The factor of enlightenment of equanimity is the mental state called Tatra Majjatata. In Pali, which means equipoise of mental balance, which prevents the practitioner's mind from being lazy, shrinking, retardation, or shivering, but always keeps the mind in balance. In the practitioner's mind, he has a strong concentration if the energy is weak. Then arises laziness. By the same token, if energy is strong and the concentration is weak, then restlessness becomes stronger. Therefore, strong concentration with weak energy, as well as strong energy with weak concentration, cannot produce the supra-mundane knowledge of the path, which is called Sambodhi. For this purpose, both energy and concentration should be in balance. Therefore, equipoise or mental balance, upekka, which brings both energy and concentration into balance, is a factor of enlightenment. That equanimity gradually develops in the domains of body and feelings, etc. And abandoning the shrunkenness and restlessness of the nature of shyness and the shivering of mind and their associated defilements, keeping the mind in balance, finally produces the supra-mundane knowledge of the path. So far, what we did was explain the factors of enlightenment in a particular manner. for the better understanding of them here will be introduced in another way. So the upekka, the last one, the factor of enlightenment of equanimity, that we have to understand something, that when we hear the word equanimity, we usually remind the word that the upekka feeling. But here, upekka is not a feeling. There is a mental factor in the wholesome mental factors, something called tatra majjatata. That particular mental factor is what meant here as upekka, and what it does is the balancing the or the calming down or the maintaining the equal the functions equally of the mental factors and the mind. That's what here meant as upekka, and I think it was mentioned here what happens when the virya or energy is strong and concentration is low. So that's what it means here as the equanimity. Is there anything to be clarified about this, the factor of equanimity, the upekka sambodhanga?
And that's why sometimes we hear that if you try too hard, you may not reach the level of concentration, but letting go and just that tends to help to bring that concentration.
It's sort of shallow understanding, that's quite correct, but it in this context it's quite deep. Yes, because these the functions of the mental factors, as mentioned here, should not be I mean, varies. Sort of should be maintained in equal phase. That is done by that particular mental factor called tatra majjatata, which literally means is they are in the middle.
Right.
So you can learn it when you study the wholesome mental factors. There are 19 wholesome mental factors which are universal for all the wholesome chittas. So this mental factor is one of them. And in the context of this, the factors of enlightenment, it needs to develop to supramundane level to be able to cut off all the defilements.
Avasarai Bhante, you just mentioned it's in the middle. That means it's neutral sort of a state
Yes,
of the
yes,
mind.
yes, of course. That's why it is called the factor of enlightenment of equanimity.
Okay, so it's sort of right. Okay.
Yes, so we have to keep it in our mind that this is not that we learn as the feeling of equanimity.
Right.
It's not upekka vedana. That's what I wanted to tell you.
This is sort of a state of some sort of a state of a mind.
Yes,
in that
mind
way.
and the mental factors.
Okay.
Yes. This.
So sorry, Bhante.
Yes, no worries.
Mental factors. Is it what do you call this? Sobana Sadharana Chaitasika?
Yes, yes,
One.
yes. There are 19 Sobana Sadharana Chaitasikas. So
this is one of
this is one of them. Yes.
Okay.
Tatra Majjatata in Pali.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. There's another way of explanation of these factors. Let's see. The factor of enlightenment of mindfulness is the nature of the mind of the person who practices concentration meditation, which is not distracted into many objects, but coming again and again to the same objects, such as the parts of the body, and the nature of the mind of the person who practices vipassana, whose mind is also not distracted in many objects, but remains or comes again and again to the object of aggregates, or the same object of meditation that comes to the mind again and again. The factor of enlightenment, of investigation, of the Dhamma is the better understanding, seeing and knowing of the parts of the body, etc. When practicing concentration, meditation and the aggregates, etc. When practicing vipassana meditation, so as we've discussed before, this is called the Dhamma Vicaya Sambojjhanga. When we develop, when we practice vipassana, we see those ultimate realities in special way. And that's what it simply means, vipassana. Special way means their true natures of, for example, like impermanent, unsatisfactoriness and soullessness. The factor of enlightenment of energy is the ability to practice meditation well, without laziness or retardation of mind. The factor of enlightenment of rapture is the enjoyment and happiness that one engages and gains through the practice of meditation. The factor of enlightenment of tranquility is the ability to practice meditation happily without any fatigue or oppression. The factor of enlightenment of concentration is establishment of mind on the meditation object without any distractions or wavering. The factor of enlightenment of equanimity is the ability to carry on meditation as without much effort by balancing both energy and concentration. So these were some different way of explanation about the factors of enlightenment. The dependence of the factors of enlightenment. As a farmer who earns money through farming first needs to be obtain a field. Likewise, the good person who wishes to develop and obtain certainly a good unworldly bliss of the gems of 7 factors of enlightenment, and Nibbana is a very world which are even more superior to the bliss of having 7 gems by the universal king, should develop the things that are the field for the development of the factors of enlightenment. Virtue, association with good friends, and wise attention are the dependent factors to be developed first by the practitioner. Therefore, the Buddha said, monks, whatever living beings that perform the 4 postures, sometimes walking, sometimes standing, sometimes sitting, and sometimes laying down, they all do these dependent of earth, established on earth. So too, monks, the monk develops the 7 factors of enlightenment dependent on virtue. established on virtue. A monk develops and cultivates 7 factors of enlightenment. So virtue here means the morality, the sila. Sila is the field or the base for the to develop these factors of enlightenment. As analogy goes, the farmer needs to have a field to just to grow crops or whatever like that. One who interested in developing these factors of enlightenment, it's the base is the virtue or the morality, the sila. Then the monks as a dawn is a forerunner and precursor of the arising of the sun. Association with a good friend is a forerunner of the precursor of the development of the 7 factors of enlightenment. Development of the 7 factors of enlightenment is to be expected only from the one who has association with a good friend. So as we all know, having a good friend is one of the most important factors in the teachings of the Buddha to develop any good. That is why in number of occasions the Buddha admired to having good friends. So the most, the best, the friend in the world is the Samma Sambuddha. Only when the Samma Sambuddha appears in the world that anyone can come to know these factors of enlightenment or the virtues or about the morality, which are the most important factors to develop these good qualities. So having a good friend or the Kalyana Mitta is very important to develop these factors of enlightenment. Then monks, as the dawn is a forerunner, the precursor. Wise attention is a forerunner, precursor for the development of the 7 factors of enlightenment. The development of the 7 factors of enlightenment should be expected only from the person who has wise attention. So the wise attention means here the yoniso manasikara. Those who have yoniso manasikara or contemplating in proper way is one of the foundation of developing in these factors of enlightenment. So these 3 factors, sila, the morality or the virtue, then a good friend, one who has the good knowledge about the deep teachings of the Buddha, the good friend, and the wise attention, the yoniso manasikara. So these 3 factors are very important to develop these factors of enlightenment. Okay, I think that's enough for today. So any questions or anything to be discussed further to clarify, or if you have any suggestions or anything to adapt about what we've discussed so far?
But I was just reflecting that Virya came up
Yes.
in many of the Bojjhangas. And so I just observed that it's probably one of the more important qualities to try and.
Yes, yes. Without virya, we can't do anything. even join this or any other class to try to learn.
Yeah.
Yes, so it is Very important. Without having virya, we can't even do this.
Yes.
Yes. So I appreciate and admire each and every one of you who are joining and try to learn these factors of enlightenment. Okay, then let's wind up today. Study the rest of the factors in next week. So let's share the merits that we've generated today by discussing and learning this noble Dhamma with the departed relatives. May all our departed relatives accept these merits, and may all they be well, happy, and prosperous. Idam me ñāti nang hotu sukhita hontu ñātayo. Idam me ñāti nang hotu sukhita hontu ñātayo. Idam me ñāti nang hotu sukhita hontu ñātayo. And let's transfer merits to the Devas as well. May all the deities accept these merits and may protect all of us. Yathavata cha amhehi sambhatang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhiyam. Yathavata cha amhehi sambhatang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhiyam. Itthavata cha amhi sambhatang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhiyam. Teruvan saranai හැම දිනාටම. May the noble triple gem bless you all.